There's a boy sitting in a room full of men. They speak of war, of politics, of legacy. Their voices carry weight. The boy watches from the side, half listening, half forgetting himself. He doesn't speak because no one expects him to. He doesn't interrupt because he's not yet someone people wait to hear. His name is Wart, but history will remember him as King Arthur. In that moment, though, he is invisible, unchosen, a background character in someone else's story. He scrubs the armor, he fetches the food. He is useful, not seen. And if you've ever looked around and felt like the world already decided who gets to lead while you're still waiting to be invited, you already know his story. Maybe you've spent years being loyal, hard-working, kind, and still feel overlooked. Still feel like leadership belongs to someone louder, bolder, born for it. That's the lie. You've heard it your whole life. Some people are just born leaders. They have the look, the voice, the confidence. As if greatness is genetic, as if power is inherited, not earned. Carl Jung would disagree. So would every soul who's ever been forged through pain instead of praise. Jung wrote that the most damaging thing is not what happens to us, but what never gets to live inside us. The potential left unlived, the truth we never say, the leader we bury beneath the belief that we're not enough. You were never meant to be born ready, you were meant to become. Leadership isn't in your DNA, it's in your decision to rise while still doubting yourself. It's in the moment you stop rehearsing confidence and start remembering who you are beneath the silence, not the mask, not the performance, but the part of you that knows you've always been more than you let show. Even Vince Lombardi, who led warriors on the field, said, "Leaders aren't born, they are made. And they are made just like anything else, through hard work." But Jung saw the deeper truth. Leaders are made through inner confrontation, through surrender to discomfort, through the long road home to wholeness. So let's start where your story really begins. Not with applause, not with power, but with a question. What if your quiet, your fear, your hesitation is not proof that you're unfit to lead, but evidence that your crown is still in the forge? Because the ones who were born into it rarely understand the weight of it, but those who had to become, they carry the throne in their bones. And they lead not because they were chosen, but because they chose to become. Every leader begins with a mask. Not a sinister one, not a lie, a survival mask. A social mirror we polish until it reflects back the version of ourselves we think others want to see. We wear it in meetings, in interviews, in conversations where silence feels like failure. Carl Jung called it the persona, the part of you that learns how to belong before it learns how to lead. It's the smile that hides hesitation. The voice that sounds confident because trembling isn't allowed. The way you make eye contact just long enough to be seen, but not long enough to be known. And at first it helps. The world loves the persona. It gets promoted, applauded, imitated. It can fill a room with presence, but it can't fill you. Because the persona is not a soul, it's a mask. And the moment you start to believe it's all you are, something in you begins to fracture. You see this in leaders all the time. The executive who commands every room but collapses alone. And the visionary who can't sit still in silence. The high performer who can't explain why success feels like suffocation. Not because they're inauthentic, because they've become exiled from themselves. The persona became so convincing, so rewarded, that the real person behind it got edited out. And this is where the mirror enters, not the one on your bathroom wall, the internal one, the mirror made of memory and stillness. The one that doesn't flatter, but tells the truth, the one that waits for you when you've run out of performance. That moment, the first time you sit with yourself and say, "I don't know who I am when I'm not performing," isn't a crisis. It's the beginning of returning. Jung didn't say to destroy the persona, he said to differentiate from it. To stop being inside the mask and start holding it, to choose when to wear it and when to take it off. And that's where real leadership begins, because people don't follow perfection, they follow coherence. They follow someone whose public life matches their private one, someone who doesn't need applause to remember who they are. So if you're tired of pretending, if you've achieved but still feel unseen, if you've mastered the performance but feel disconnected from your own soul, you're not failing, you're awakening. And the mirror is not there to shame you, it's there to return you to the one who never needed a mask to matter. The persona may open the door, but it's the mirror that hands you the key. Because the crown means nothing if it rests on someone you no longer recognize. No one leads for long without meeting the darkness. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It shows up in quiet moments, when your reaction surprises you, when you snap and don't know why, when you keep chasing goals that don't fulfill you, when success tastes like ash, and you wonder, is this really who I am? Carl Jung had a name for this place. The shadow. It isn't evil, it isn't wrong. It's simply the part of you that you haven't claimed. The desires you were told were shameful. The rage you weren't allowed to show, the envy you buried, the selfishness, the grief, the need for control, the parts you disowned to survive but never actually lost. And what isn't integrated controls you. You've seen it. The spiritual leader who manipulates, the activist who shames, the visionary who burns their team to keep their halo lit. They don't set out to do harm, but they've mistaken performance for healing, persona for wholeness. And their shadow, unacknowledged, does the leading. But here's the sacred paradox. Your shadow isn't here to ruin you. It's here to complete you. Jung wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Because only when you see it can you choose how to carry it. You don't need to fix the shadow. You need to face it. And facing it doesn't mean collapsing in guilt. It means standing in front of your own chaos and saying, I see you. I won't let you run my life from the basement anymore. This is where transformation begins. Not when you become perfect, but when you become honest. The sword you carry as a leader, your insight, your authority, your power, becomes dangerous when wielded unconsciously. But that same sword, when forged through shadow work, becomes a sacred tool. Imagine a leader who knows their own rage and so doesn't need to raise their voice, who's met their ambition in the dark and so leads from purpose, not hunger, who's wept in the silence and so speaks with compassion instead of performance. That's not weakness. That's what makes you worthy, because real leadership doesn't come from never falling. It comes from walking back through the parts of yourself you were once afraid to name, and emerging with nothing left to prove. So, if you're feeling fractured, if something inside you is begging to be seen, but you've been told it would make you unfit to lead, know this. It's not your flaw, it's your forge. And the leader who has faced their shadow doesn't just walk into the room, they change it by standing in it whole. Because the world doesn't need more leaders who've memorized the light. It needs those who have learned to walk with their darkness and still choose love. Somewhere along the path, the question changes. You stop asking how to be more efficient. You stop obsessing over charisma. And in the silence between two achievements, you finally ask the one question that matters. What kind of person am I becoming as I lead? That question marks the beginning of your real authority. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole, not better, not more successful, but integrated, where every part of you, strong and soft, disciplined and wounded, seen and unseen, comes into alignment. This is the ground where real leadership begins. And as you reach that ground, the archetypes start to emerge. The king, the queen, the warrior, the sage, the healer, not as metaphors, as energies, as inner figures, as spiritual muscles waiting to be activated. The king or the queen carries vision, not ambition, vision. They bless, they steward. They take responsibility before they take credit. They're less concerned with how they look and more concerned with what they hold. Their crown is not a decoration. It is a weight they have earned through inner gravity. The warrior brings action, boundary, decisiveness. But a warrior without purpose is dangerous. A warrior without wisdom is violent. That's why the warrior must kneel, not to others, but to the king within. Only then can they fight for what matters, rather than what distracts. The sage watches, listens, speaks only when silence has done its work. The sage is not above. The sage is beneath, rooted like an ancient tree that bends without breaking. Their voice does not seek to convince, it invites remembrance. And beneath it all is the wounded healer, the one who's been cracked open and turned that pain into presence, who doesn't flinch when others bleed, because they have already learned to hold their own scars without shame. The best leaders don't pick an archetype. They learn to carry all of them. Because leadership isn't a brand, it's a sacred balance. Too much king and you become rigid. Too much warrior and you burn out. Too much sage and you withhold. Too much healer and you disappear. But when they work together, when you wear the crown, hold the sword, listen like a sage and love like the healer, your presence becomes truth in motion. People stop following your charisma. They begin trusting your coherence. And that's when something rare happens. Your leadership no longer comes from fear of falling behind. It comes from having already faced what was behind you and no longer needing to outrun it. You don't just become someone others follow. You become someone who holds the compass they've been silently searching for. The boy in the room, the one who thought leadership belonged to someone else, he didn't have to perform to be chosen. He had to remember who he already was and choose to become it. Every myth ends the same way, not with the conquest. Not with the reward, but with the return. The hero doesn't stay on the mountain. They come back, changed. And when they do, no one recognizes them at first. Not because their face is different, but because their presence is. They've touched something deeper. And now they carry it silently, steadily into every room they enter. Carl Jung called this the individuation journey. But in every myth, it's the same shape. Descent, ordeal, transformation, and finally return. But the return is the hardest part. Because after you've faced your shadow, seen through your mask, integrated your fire, and reconciled your contradictions, you can't go back to pretending. You can't lead the way you once did through performance, posture, or pressure. You lead now from stillness, from alignment, from presence. Not everyone will understand this version of you. Some will miss the old performance, some will misread your piece as distance. But the ones who matter, they'll feel it, the truth in your voice, the integrity in your silence, the gravity that comes from someone who has already been broken and came back whole. This is where many turn back. Because leading from the soul is costly. It will ask for your comfort. It will stretch your courage. It will break every illusion of control. But those who keep going, they become something rare. They don't just manage people. They awaken them. They don't just organize systems. They shift souls, because they don't lead from what they know. They lead from who they are. You have walked through the fire. You have faced the part of you that wanted to hide. You have stood in front of the mirror in the dark and chosen not to flinch. You have stepped into the forge, not to be admired, but to be made. And now, like Ward, like Arthur, like every story that began with doubt, you return. Not to take the crown, but to carry it with humility, with clarity, with strength. Because great leaders were never born. They were forged in silence, tested in darkness, and remembered not for what they conquered, but for who they chose to become. If this story was yours, if you felt this fire, faced that mask, held that mirror, write "I'm becoming" in the comments. Let the others know they're not walking alone. Because leadership is not about rising above the world. It's about returning to it, more human, more whole, and more real than ever before.